Princeton Incident, 1844. You may have seen on the little blurb, it was also called his Accidency in the Princeton Incident, 1844. We'll get to what accidency means, but the Princeton Incident is going to be this thing that is going to happen right across from Mount Vernon along the Potomac River in February of 1844, and it's going to be a cataclysmic change to the United States. It's something, however, that's very little known about, but we'll explore it here. It is going to, of course, require some foreshadowing, as I always like to do with my programs. And what I want to do is talk about the election of 1840, which of course is going to have huge ramifications with this guy becoming our president-elect, President William Henry Harrison, Virginian by birth, war hero, old Tippecanoe in his fight against Tecumseh out in the middle of the United States as we know it today, out in a place called Indiana. He is going to win a victory at a place called Tippecanoe, and he is going to be one of these war hero presidents riding his coattails of his military success to the office of President of the United States. He is going to take the oath of office the following March after his election in 1840. March 4th, 1841, he is going to deliver, ladies and gentlemen, in very cold, nasty weather, the longest presidential inaugural ever. 2 hours. Yeah, Franklin Roosevelt in 1945 is going to speak for about 12 minutes. But here, what we are going to have is William Henry Harrison speaking for 2 hours, and you know what? He's a man. He is a man. He doesn't believe that he really needs an overcoat. He doesn't believe he needs a cover on his head, and he's going to pay for it. He's going to get ill, and he's seemingly going to be a little bit on the mend, however. But he goes up to Washington, takes his post as President of the United States, of course, in the White House, and he's going to go to a farmer's market one day. Cold, nasty, he's a man. He is not going to wear that top coat or that hat, and he is going to basically get a second dose of what he had caught on Inauguration Day. And this, ladies and gentlemen, is brief. He is going to die a month after he takes the oath of office. April 4th, 1841, President William Henry Harrison is going to pass from this earth. Now, something I want you to know about the vice presidency is this. John Tyler is going to be the fellow who is going to take that office. And of course, we know the call was Tippecanoe and Tyler too. And he is going to be one of these people who sits in the office of vice president and really doesn't revel in it. He is going to basically realize that it's a lot of cord snipping and champagne bashing up against ships, and basically sitting in the Senate and being a tipping vote in votes in the Senate. Franklin Roosevelt's first vice president, John Nance Garner, is going to say of the vice presidency that it wasn't worth a pitcher of warm piss.
Oh, nice. That's pretty good.
There is a G-rated version, but hey, we're all friends, right? Well, as this is going to go on, John Tyler, he does his duty. He swears in senators in the Senate chamber in March, but he goes back home because he knows I don't really have much to do. He goes to his estate down near Williamsburg, where we just left, and he is, of course, going to be apprised of the fact that the president's not doing well. And on the 5th of April, he is going to receive the communique. President Harrison had died. Now he's going to have to go up to Washington. So here we have President John Tyler. Well, it's not really that evident that this is going to be the case right here. Article 2, Section 1, Clause 6 of the United States Constitution is basically going to say, in the case of removal of the president from office or his death, resignation, or inability to discharge the powers and duties of said office, the same shall devolve on the vice president. It doesn't say the vice president shall become the president. It says the vice president shall have those powers. So a lot of people are kind of, I don't know about this. His cabinet William Henry Harrison's cabinet is basically going to welcome John Tyler to Washington, but they say, you know what? We are going to do a voting, basically, system here in the cabinet. That's the way we will set policy. John Tyler doesn't see it this way. He sees himself as president, and he is going to say to the cabinet, I beg your pardon, gentlemen. I am very glad to have in my cabinet such able statesmen you have proved yourselves to be, and I shall be pleased to avail myself of your counsel and advice, but I can never consent to being dictated to as to what I shall or shall not do. I, as president, shall be responsible for my administration. I hope to have your hearty cooperation in carrying out its measures. So long as you see fit to do this, I shall be glad to have you with me. When you think otherwise, your resignations will be accepted. So, with this, he is going to, of course, have people who are going to support him, but there's going to be other people who give him the stink eye, of course. This is where we get the term, his accidency. Because, of course, he becomes president by accident. And there's going to be a little bit more that's going to reinforce this whole accidency thing that we're going to talk about. Now, what we're going to have is further down the pike, we're going to have further clarification in the Constitution that's going to say exactly how things are going to be if a president dies. We're going to go through the motions for quite a long time, but believe it or not, it's not until the Summer of Love that we are going to have an amendment that basically speaks the language. 25th Amendment, Section 1, in case of the removal of president from office or of his death or resignation, the vice president shall become president. Okay, now, here's the trivia portion of our show. Can you tell me the 3 presidents that never had vice presidents? And it's basically tied to what I just talked to you about with Tyler right here.
Tyler.
Besides Tyler, we are going to have 3 other people, and these 3 other people are Millard Fillmore. Zach Taylor dies, no vice president, and he is not going to be elected in his own right. Andrew Johnson, same thing. Lincoln dies, he's never elected in his own right. He just continues on. And Chet Arthur. Okay, so of course we know you have, well, what about Franklin Roosevelt? Okay, well, Harry Truman is going to become president. He elected in 1948 as Alva Barkley. We know Lyndon Johnson is going to go along. He is going to have Hubert Humphrey. But these are the 3, besides Tyler, that are not going to have vice presidents. This is going to be a presidency which is going to be foisted upon John Tyler, so much so that he is going to have to basically rush to Washington. His wife, Letitia, is going to be a lady who is going to bear him an awful lot of children. He is going to, he's going to sire 15 children in his life. But she is not going to give him all the children. She is going to give him about half of those 15. And Letitia, who follows John Tyler up to Washington, is going to die during the administration. She is going to pass on from a stroke in 1842. So John Tyler is not only considerable pressure politically that are going to fall on his shoulders, but he has a great social and personal angst that is going to follow him up there too. He's going to lose his beloved wife, Letitia. But he is a red-blooded American male, and he is going to feel that he's got a lot more life to live, and he is going to start looking elsewhere after Letitia passes on. He's not going to be lonely, don't worry. One of the things that he's going to have to face is the Oregon question. There is a great call called 5440 or fight. And as we look at the Oregon Territory right here, it's basically a pie-in-the-sky view of this area in the Pacific Northwest as we know it today. How far indeed does America's designs on the Oregon Territory go? This is a decision that is going to be meted out between the British and the United States, ultimately by 1846. But in the early 1840s, there could be some problems between the United States and Britain. with them looming above Oregon as it is, looking very lustfully on the Columbia River Valley, we are going to have decisions that are going to have to be made, and will they be made diplomatically? As I told you, foreshadowing, they will be done. But during this time, there is the decisions that are going to have to be made to put us on a defensive or offensive footing militarily, that we are going to be able to at least make a good demonstration against the British in this Oregon question. Well, one of the things that's going to have to come to pass is naval power. You cannot ignore the Royal Navy. We already talked about how powerful they are in the whole story of Yorktown. This guy right here, he's more than just legs. His name is Robert F. Stockton. He is the grandson of a signer of the Declaration of Independence. And he is going to be someone who is going to join the United States Navy. And he is going to be someone who sees this vision as a United States, the little engine that could. We're going to have to, with our little Navy, basically necessity breeds invention, and we're going to have to see if we can beat the Royal Navy, not with numbers, but with technology. And Robert F. Stockton is, in the 1830s, going to go over to London, and he is going to witness a revolution. Does anyone remember the name Robert Stockton from one of my programs earlier? When I gave you the port preview for Norfolk Portsmouth, remember I told you about that naval officer who put that gun against that African king's head and said, you'll either sign this territory over to us or you're going to have this all over the paper, your brains. The beginnings of Liberia. It's the same Robert Stockton right here. He goes to London in 1837 to go on a boat ride on the Thames River. There is a barge that is going to be pulled along by a propeller vessel. A propeller vessel, this is a newfangled thing right here as far as the way the propeller is going to basically make locomotion occur. It is not going to be a paddle wheel. We have steamboats, they have been in operation for years, but paddle wheels are vulnerable. If you are in a naval engagement, basically, and you're fighting a steamboat, what do you want to do? You want to aim for those paddles. You turn them into a sailing ship really, really quick, okay? Well, with this screw propulsion, basically under the waterline, just like our ship is moving through the water, this is going to be a way to protect the means of propulsion. And who is going to be the person who is going to develop this? It's initially an invention that, of all people, the Austrians developed in 1794. But it's not going to be perfected until a Swede comes along, a guy by the name of John Ericsson. John Ericsson is the Mozart of inventors. He is an engineer ever since he is a tender age of about 7 or 8. He's building windmills in his mother's kitchen. He is going to, by the time he is a young teen, he is going to be standing on books, looking through surveying equipment, helping to build the Gotha ship canal across Sweden. He is going to be seen as too big for Sweden to hold, and the King of Sweden says to him, young man, go west. He goes to England, the center of the Industrial Revolution, and this is one of the things that he is trying to sell to the world, screw propulsion, his perfection of saying. Well, Robert Stockton is going to be suitably impressed by this demonstration on the Thames River. And he is going to say to John Ericsson, after Ericsson is going to be rebuffed, the Royal Navy and their military brass is on this barge, and they are witnessing the same thing Stockton is, but they say to Ericsson, we are not suitably impressed. Robert Stockton says, I am. Come to the United States, we can do business together. Well, John Ericsson, rebuffed by the English, he is going to go across the pond. Here we go. There you go. Raiders of the Lost Ark. Going from England to the United States, he is going to go there and eventually stay there. Okay, he is going to go to Philadelphia. He's going to work with Stockton and ultimately the Navy Department in the development of a ship that is going to use screw propulsion, a naval warship. He is eventually going to settle in New York City, becomes an American citizen by 1848, and he will pass on as an American citizen. His body will be conveyed ultimately back to Sweden, and that's where he rests to this day. But John Ericsson is going to be here to stay after he leaves England in the early 1840s to get to Philadelphia. What is he doing in Philadelphia? He is putting together this ship that he and Stockton envisioned that would change naval warfare as we know it. This is going to be a ship, a sloop of war known as the Princeton. Now, why is it called the Princeton? It's because where Stockton's from. Basically, Ericsson's benefactor, Stockton, we are going to have this ship named for his hometown. So with this, Ericsson's going to get to work. It's going to be laid down in 1842, its hull, and it is going to be, for all intents and purposes, completed a year later by the time we reach October of 1843. It's going to start making trials in the Delaware River, and by the 17th of October, it is going to make its way out into the Atlantic for a brief journey up to New York from Philadelphia. As we have this occur, what Princeton is going to do is try to basically test its engines out, literally, against another ship, another fast ship. This is what Princeton looks like. Here we go. USS Princeton. It is a ship that is 164 feet long. It is 30 feet wide. Our fair vessel right here is 243 foot long, and it is about 56 feet wide, just to give you a sense of the dimensions. And this ship is going to have two big guns on it. There's going to be a gun called Oregon, for the Oregon question. And this is going to be developed by Captain John Ericsson. Captain John Ericsson is called captain because he actually was a captain in the Swedish Navy and Army before he went to England, so he always loved to be referred to as captain. Very proud man. He is going to make sure that this gun is of a safe measure to be placed on this boat. It is, Oregon is 8 tons.
Oh my.
And it is 13 feet long. And it is basically a weapon that is going to be able to fire a projectile over 225 pounds. Ericsson is going to test it. He's going to do this over and over, and he realizes he's going to have to do something that's very common for the day for making guns of this caliber. He's going to put protective bands around the breech of it. And what you want to do is, if you're a gun engineer, he is going to take these bands and he's going to shrink them to the weapon. Okay, this is going to add to its strength. In other words, with the great pressure from the firing of this gun, sometimes cracks can develop. And what you need to do is add these protective bands. So Ericsson's going to do this. Well, Robert Stockton fancies himself an engineer of sorts, and he's going to make a gun. This gun is 12.5 tons. This is a 14-foot long gun, and he is going to call it the Peacemaker. Robert Stockton is not going to test his gun as much as Ericsson does. Less than 10 times we are going to have Peacemaker fired before it's going to be mounted on the Princeton. Ericsson fires Oregon hundreds of times. John Ericsson is basically going to say to Stockton, "You, sir, are a naval officer. I am engineer. You do not know what you're doing." Basically, in so many words, he is going to brief him that this is a dangerous game to play. Stockton is basically happy with his new toy here, and he wants to put his mark on it, and he is going to put Peacemaker on, and Oregon is going to be there as well. Now, when you went to the Naval Academy, did anyone see the Oregon? I mentioned it to you in my port preview. I don't know if anyone looked for it or not. It was right next to Bill the Goat, right at the entrance of the Naval Academy gate. There's this big gun just sitting there. It's called the Oregon, and that is the survivor of the Princeton. So what is this ship doing up at New York? Why did it leave the Delaware River? Well, Stockton, like I said, he wants to show off his new toy. Takes it up to New York Harbor, and he is going to challenge the Great Western. The Great Western was seen as the greased lightning of the age. This is a paddle wheeler, and it is going to set all kinds of records going across the Atlantic Ocean. Stockton wants to show his Princeton off against Great Western, and there's going to be a race in New York Harbor. If you ever go on the Hudson River around where the Statue of Liberty is, that's where this race occurred. The Great Western is going to begin the race, basically going with a full head of steam across New York Harbor. But the funny thing is, Princeton's just going in a circle. Is it steering off? Is Stockton going to be absolutely embarrassed by this? Well, what Stockton's doing is showing off. By going around in circles, he eventually is going to straighten out, and he passes the Great Western like it's standing still. People are agog at this. They are just absolutely amazed at what they're seeing because it looks like it's moving as if pushed by an unseen hand. It is going to have screw propulsion under the waterline. People had never seen such a thing before, and Stockton's tickled to death. He is going to be happy with this. He's going to bring it back down to Philadelphia for some more tinkering after this great victory in New York Harbor. But he is going to go up to New York for some more business shortly before he is going to leave for our fair capital city of Washington. And the last time that he leaves New York City, there's someone waiting to join Stockton and the Princeton. It is Captain John Erickson. When Stockton goes down to Washington, D.C., John Erickson is of the belief that, of course, he is going to go along because he designed not only the Oregon, the gun, but the ship itself. It's his pride, too. And John Erickson is standing there at the harbor on the pier with his bags. Here comes the Princeton. There goes the Princeton. John Erickson is left there standing by the waterside, and he is angry, livid. This is a man that you do not want to make angry, John Erickson, and he realizes that Stockton's going to try to go to Washington and get all the accolades for himself. Moving down to the city of Washington, we are going to, by February of 1844, going to find that indeed it is going to arrive at the Navy Yard to great acclaim. And a week after it arrives, there is going to be a test of the Princeton on the Potomac River. There's going to be many members of Congress that are going to be aboard, a lot of dignitaries. There's going to be hundreds of people. Remember, I told you, a much smaller boat than what we're on now. Hundreds of people plus the crew on board, packed to the gills is what we're going to have on the Princeton. As this ship is going to be going down the Potomac River from the Navy Yard, making its way to Alexandria, picking up guests, going down to Mount Vernon and back, okay? This is going to be a demonstration not only of the Princeton and, of course, Erickson's accomplishments, but Stockton wants to show his gun off, and he is going to fire the Peacemaker. People are going to love seeing this huge caliber weapon fired. I'll do it again. I love doing that. Anyway, he's firing live ammunition here on the Potomac River. Can you imagine? Today, this river right here, live ammunition fired upon it, it's going to land in the water and people are going to be clapping and applauding. And can you imagine if you were fishing on the bank right next to where something like this happened? You couldn't, of course, do such a thing today. They have testing grounds for such things. But as it is, this is going to require another journey. And this is going to be on the 28th of February, where there's going to be more dignitaries, more congressmen, more senators, more cabinet members, and John Tyler comes back into the picture. John Tyler is going to be on board February 28th, 1844. Ladies in all their finery, men in all their fine tailed coats and top hats and whatnot. officers resplendent in their uniforms. We are going to have dignitaries to the tune of Thomas Hart Benton of Missouri, senator, very, very strong personality coming out of the Midwest. He is someone who's going to be on board to see what indeed this ship is all about, and these guns, these vaunted guns. There's also going to be cabinet members in the form of Thomas Gilmer, Secretary of the Navy, bringing his wife on board with him. She is tugging at his arm. She doesn't want to get on board. They're all boarding in Alexandria, and they're going to take a trip down to Mount Vernon just like the other ship did, the other journey the ship did. Mrs. Gilmer basically tells her husband she doesn't have a good feeling about this. And Thomas Gilmer looks at her, and for all intents and purposes, in so many words, he is going to say, I'm the Secretary of the Navy. We have to go. So he's going to gently prod her up the gangway with him to get on the boat. And then we're going to have the Secretary of State. Some of you may have heard of this fellow's name, where he's going to be the fellow who is going to basically negotiate the annexation of Texas. His name is Abel Upshur. There are many places named for Abel Upshur around the United States, and he's going to be one of the people on board, as well as a New York politician by the name of David Gardner. Now, perhaps to John Tyler, who's also going to be on board this ship, perhaps David Gardner is the person that he's going to most want to talk with, maybe even more than Stockton. Because remember what I told you about Tyler? He's looking, okay? He's looking at his daughter. So David Gardner, she's going to be in her early 20s, and Tyler's in his early 50s, okay? So this is Julia Gardner. Daintiest thing this side of the Mississippi River. This is the apple of John Tyler's eye. He meets her in New York City, and he wants to marry her, make her John Tyler's wife 2.0. And she is kind of, I don't know about this. She sees him as a nice man, perhaps as kind of like an uncle figure, but not really too keen on it. And Thomas Gardner, he is not really keen on this either. So they're kind of keeping their arms length from the president with his amorous desires here. But I just want you to be aware they're on board. There's going to be also Dolly Madison, our first lady under the, of course, you know, the father of the Constitution, James Madison, and Dolly Madison there during the War of 1812. She saves George Washington's portrait. Right before the British burn the president's house, she is going to be responsible for you being able to see it. If you visit the East Room to this day, the portrait of George Washington, she's on board. So Dolly Madison, and we are going to begin this journey with great fanfare, flags fluttering in the wind from Alexandria to go down to Mount Vernon. With this, ladies and gentlemen, just like Lawrence of Arabia, I'm going to have an intermission because I'm going to see where we are. Because I don't want you to miss this. Yeah, we're still too far away. I'll probably be done with the talk by then. Intermission's over. All right, so like I said, Mount Vernon, this is what it looked like in the middle of the 19th century, the home of the father of our country, George Washington. But it is going to be the symbolic turnaround. This is where these shots are going to be fired, these 225-pound behemoths that are going to plop into the middle of the Potomac River. And indeed, Stockton is doing the same thing this day that he did on the 20th. He fires the guns into the river. People are oohing and eyeing. These shock and awe demonstrations are absolutely lighting up everyone's day. And yes, there's plenty of this too. There's plenty of food, there's plenty of alcohol, and indeed what is going to occur around the time that they are making their turn at Mount Vernon is the president is going to be down below decks, and there's a series of toasts going on. And when these toasts are going on, Abel Upshur, the Secretary of State, is going to notice that an awful lot of the bottles that he's trying to refresh his glass. he notices an awful lot of these bottles are empty. They are sucking down the liquor here. And he is going to say to Stockton, we've got to do something about all these dead bodies. That's what they called empty wine and champagne bottles. Basically, he is going to say, Stockton, we have plenty more live bodies to replace them. And he's going to put more full bodies of alcohol on the table. More glasses are going to be filled, toasts are going to be made, and in the ear of Stockton is a whisper. You should fire the gun again. Stockton says, we've done that enough today. The Secretary of the Navy wants to see you fire the gun again. Let's do it. So they're going to go up and they're going to prepare the gun for firing. Gilmer goes up there. We're going to have the Secretary of State up there. Gardner makes his way up. And the president's just about to make his way up to the deck when someone tells him they're about to make a toast to you, Mr. President. So John Tyler is going to be down below decks and he is going to be receiving a toast when Stockton is ready to pull that, of course, that lanyard, of course, lighting that match for one more fire. Well, as this happens, we have this throng gathered around the breech of the weapon, and as some of you may know already or have already surmised, something bad happens.
Well timed.
Yeah,
Yeah. You said so.
I planned that. It was choreographed last night. But what is going to happen is this gun is going to blow up. I told you Erickson had warned him about his weapon. There are going to be cracks that are going to be found on the Peacemaker during that trial, and Stockton's going to put protective bands around it, but he's going to basically weld the bands to the weapon. He's going to weaken for basically all purposes. He is going to weaken the weapon rather than by shrinking the bands to it, protect the weapon. And indeed, that is going to result in this horrific accident, which is going to have huge ramifications. This is an image, I believe, from Harper's Weekly right here. Harper's Weekly, Frank Leslie's Illustrated. That's where you're going to find an awful lot of your imagery from the middle of the 19th century of a detailed fashion such as this. However, there are also images from the 19th century that capture our fancy as Americans as well. Excuse me. And these images that I'm talking about, of course, are, you know, we're getting towards Christmas, right? You know, that song, Sleigh Ride. What do they talk about? Courier and knives. We think of happy images, courier and knives, right? You know, Christmas, trees, people smiling, sleigh rides. Well, how about this for a courier and knives?
Yikes.
This is a courier and knives showing the explosion on the Princeton. There's going to be several people that are going to be hurt, including Stockton. It has been said that every hair on his head was singed off. And he was found basically sitting astride the breech of the weapon. He had been blown up and was sitting on it, and with a dazed look was saying, muttering to himself, I didn't believe such a thing was possible. And when this happens, of course, we are going to have an awful lot of people that are going to require help, such as Stockton and other people who are injured, but there are people who die. Let's look at the list here. The Secretary of State, dead. Metal flies across the deck, cutting across his midsection, disemboweling him where he stood. Thomas Gilmer, the Secretary of the Navy, his wife and her prescient statement about not wanting to be there. Her husband is going to fall where he stood. She, of course, is going to come up on the deck, see her husband, and of course she is going to go into absolute shock. Beverly Kennan is a naval officer who's also going to meet his end that day. Virgil Maxey he's a diplomat from the state of Maryland. He is going to serve, of course, in the State Department along with Abel Upshur. He is dead. David Gardner. This is, of course, the fellow who is the father of Julia. He is dead. And who is Armistead? He is the slave of the president. So we are having these 6 die. Something I want to tell you before we move along here, because I don't want this to be lost. It sounds rather cheap, but back in the day, I think it's rather interesting. The president is going to actually give Armistead's family a few $100s for the loss of Armistead. It was almost like a life insurance policy. We don't really know too much else beside that, but he is going to see if he can take care of the family in the wake of Armistead's death. David Gardner's lying there dead on the deck. I told you what happened to Mrs. Gilmer. Can you imagine Julia, her father, dead there? She is going to go into shock. She is going to pass out. Guess who is there to save the day? The President of the United States. He is going to be there to care for this stricken young lady from that moment until they get off the ship. Guess who is going to carry her off the ship? President of the United States. Guess who's going to marry her a couple of months after this happens? The President of the United States. And she is going to bear him several more children. As I said, 15, the most prolific presidents we've ever had. And as a matter of fact, this past July, his last grandson died. It was a trivia question I used to ask on the ship. Which president, what's our oldest president who still has a grandson still walking the earth? I can't do that anymore with John Tyler because Harrison Ruffin Tyler died in July, the grandson of our 7th president. So that shows the shadow that John Tyler is going to cast across the country here with his union with Julia Gardner. There, of course, is going to be a funeral which is going to be at the Congressional Cemetery. There's going to be some temporary graves that are going to be used for some of these bodies until some of them are going to be moved elsewhere. Gardner is going to go up to New York, the father of Julia Gardner, and we are going to have perhaps another funeral that the whole country is going to have to look at. Remember what I said about John Tyler? He was called his Accidency. Well, his Accidency is going to be underlined with what happened with this close call on the Princeton. Well, we all know things happen in threes, right? He has a third close call on the day of the funeral, March 2nd, 1844. Narrow escape of the president. He is coming back from the Congressional Cemetery when the horses that are pulling his carriage get spooked. They start taking off up Pennsylvania Avenue uncontrollably. This carriage could basically crash and burn, and we are going to have, of course, probably another president die. Well, fortunately, there's a fellow who steps out into the street and he stands right in front of the horses and basically waves them down. Horses, of course, are not stupid, and they are not going to run through anything. And basically, when we watch these movies, when people standing out in front of horses, they're actually doing something that gives the horse an awful lot of respect because they know the horse isn't going to just run them down unless they're, of course, in a full charge. Okay? But as it is, the president's life is going to be saved. He is going to finish out his term, and he is going to be followed by Mr. Polk, who is going to finalize the annexation of Texas. John Tyler's administration is going to be over, but his political career is not going to be finished. He is going to go on to hold other office, to include congressman to the Confederate legislature. He is going to be part of the Confederate government as well as the United States government, and he is going to pass on shortly after the war begins. So John Tyler. What about Robert Stockton? Robert Stockton is going to recover, and he is going to have to be part of the investigation because there's a huge investigation on what happened on the Princeton. And he is going to be exonerated. It is going to be basically said by those in the Capitol who are investigating this that men of science were to blame. In other words, without naming John Erickson, they are basically going to put the blame on the shoulders of other people. After all, he's a foreigner, right? He is someone who is not of the blue blood of the signers of the Declaration of Independence, and we are going to have Robert Stockton live to fight another day as an officer in the Navy. He is going to be part of the Navy during, of course, the Mexican War, which is going to follow in the 1840s. And he is going to be part of the conquest of California, the suppression of the Spanish in California during this war, and he is going to make such a mark on California that there is, of course, going to be a city named for him out there, Stockton, California. As I mentioned to you, we are going to have problems in Capitol Hill regarding this explosion. Of course, you can't just have the dust settle and, of course, go away, Stockton, you're fine. Pat him on the butt and it goes along. The Princeton is going to ultimately be scrapped in the middle of the 19th century. There's going to be bigger, more swift, screw-driven ships that are going to be built by the Navy. It is going to be part of the operation that is going to lead to the peace between the United States and Mexico, the peace treaty coming back and forth between the United States and Mexico after the signage of saying is going to be conveyed by the Princeton. Well, with this, the person that is going to be necessarily blamed is going to be John Erickson. And Erickson is due an awful lot of money by the federal government, and indeed Congress is going to vote that Erickson should be paid. He is, however, going to be paid a fraction of what he had earned with his work on the Princeton. And Stockton is not going to back him up on this. Why? Because Erickson did not come down to Capitol Hill to back up Stockton. Erickson remembered what Stockton did to him on the pier in New York. He left him high and dry. And Erickson is basically going to be of the mind that if you didn't want me to be down there, I won't go down there to Capitol Hill to defend you either. And so we are going to have Congress basically make John Erickson the scapegoat. He is going to be persona non grata to the federal government from this point on, yet he stays a citizen of the United States from 1848 until he breathes his last. He is going to continue inventing things. As a matter of fact, he's going to invent the world's first solar-powered engine, has it on top of his home in New York City before he passes on. He's going to develop torpedoes, which we know are going to be very important for the development of naval warfare and other inventions as well, as one that he is going to be very proud of called the floating battery. This is going to be found on his shelf in New York when a friend of his comes up and basically says to him, I want to see what you think of my design right here. There's a fellow engineer who wants Erickson to look at his model for an ironclad, wooden ship clad in iron for the United States Navy as the war between the states breaks out, the Civil War, the War of the Rebellion, whichever you wish to call it. John Erickson is going to look at this design and he basically tells the fellow, it'll work, it'll be fine. And we are going to have this gentleman take not only his own design down to Washington, but he is going to take Erickson's design down. He says, do you mind if I take this to Washington and show those in the halls of power what you have developed? John Erickson is basically waving off, do what you will with it. John Erickson had already tried to sell this floating battery to other people, and these other people were the French. Now, why did he want to sell to the French? Because in the 1850s, the Crimean War broke out. Over there in Russia, we are going to have the Russians fighting the Turks, the British, and the French. John Erickson is a Swede. When that war broke out, was he going to sell his design to the Russians? No. Swedes do not do business with Russians. He is not going to sell to the Turks because the Turks don't have enough money to develop such a weapon. And he is not going to sell to the English because they rebuffed him in his screw propeller. So the only people with taste in this whole matter could possibly be the French. And the government of Louis Napoleon is basically going to say, mais non, we shall not accept this design and we will move forward with our own types of ships. Well, it's ultimately going to be the United States government who moves forward. And we all know what it's going to lead to, the development of this floating battery known as Monitor, which is going to be something that many people are going to say, especially those who serve in the Navy, is going to help save the Union. We just passed over the waters where the Battle of the Ironclads took place on March 9th, 1862, as that floating battery Monitor fought to a standstill the Confederate steamer Virginia. Now, Something I want you to know about John Erickson before we close all this out is he is memorialized in Washington too. We talk about Lincoln Memorial, we talk about Thomas Jefferson Memorial, we talk about all of these places where you can go and honor those who have served our country either in group form, such as the veterans we talked about yesterday, or in a singular form. Just hundreds of feet south of the Lincoln Memorial along Independence Avenue is the memorial to John Erickson. If you find yourself walking along Independence Avenue with Lincoln Memorial just to your north, you will see this image of John Erickson sitting alongside the Potomac River, body of water that his ironclads helped to guard from the Confederate steamers that were being churned out in ports in the South. John Erickson's memorial says an awful lot about the man. He was very proud. He was a sociopath. He is someone who is not going to get along with people socially very well, and he liked to close himself away in his workshop. People of Swedish extraction in New York City tried to basically break him out of his shell. During his birthday at the end of July, they would basically do what people do at Christmas. They would sing to him outside his house. Will he come out and talk to us? Oftentimes what they would have is they would see John Erickson, a shade, basically a silhouette, would rise from his workbench, and he would lift the curtain up and look at them as they were singing, and as soon as the singing stopped, he'd put the curtain down and he would sit back down at his work desk. He was someone who really didn't have any time for anyone, well-wishers or detractors alike. He was too busy with his work, and if you visit his memorial, he won't even look at you. Because when he's sitting there in his memorial, and indeed that, he is sitting just like he would have at his workbench. He is sitting and his face is like this. So if you're standing there looking dead on at his memorial, he refuses to even look you in the eye. Dedicated in the 1920s, the John Erickson Memorial. Ladies and gentlemen, a bizarre story, but it ties directly with what we are passing today. Make sure when you see Mount Vernon, you remember not only the father of our country, but what happened in the shadow of Mount Vernon with the explosion of the Peacemaker. This is a story that has kind of been whisked under the carpet in American history, but it is a part of this journey, and whenever we begin or end the American Revolution cruises, I always want to either start with it or end with it as we are leaving Washington or entering Washington, because we are going right over the waters where it happened. Thank you so much for your time this week.